Pastor Christy, Pastor Bobby, and myself, for the last, I think, 10 to 12 weeks, we have been doing these weekly video devotionals, and I want to continue in that theme this week, since it's my turn to do that. And I simply want to read to you from Matthew chapter 22, starting at verse 36. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. And a second is like it, Jesus said. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. When Jesus says the second is like it, the part about loving your neighbor as yourself, he doesn't mean it's second in the sense that it is inferior to the first. No, he doesn't mean it as though it's second, as though it's extra credit, that, make sure you get the first one done, loving God. But if you happen to have time, then make sure you love your neighbor. He doesn't mean it. He means second in the sense of it's inferior or it's extra credit. Really, when Jesus says the second is like it, he's really saying that you show that you do the first. You show that you are sincere about loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength when you do the second. The second commandment is a way of showing that you do the first one. In the day and age in which we live right now in the United States, not only is there the pandemic of the COVID-19 virus, but we're also seeing around this pandemic of racial hatred. And I can think of no greater way right now for us to love our neighbor as ourselves than by taking time to really listen to the other person. Right now, lines are so deeply drawn in the sand that if someone crosses that line, we're almost ready just to pounce on them with some type of verbal argument, if not physically. We have such a deep divide right now that we're not taking time to listen to the other person. But as followers of Christ, especially those of us in the evangelical Christian tradition, we have to be better than that. We have to be willing to authentically listen to the other person, to empathize with the other person, to take serious what life is like for the other person. And for those of us who are followers of Christ in the evangelical Christian tradition, we really need to be more mindful of the oppressed. Throughout Scripture, God has called his people, the people who identify themselves by claiming him to be their Lord. He consistently has called us to be mindful of how we treat the oppressed, those who live amongst us but who are marginalized, who don't have the power, who don't have the voice that so many of us do. In Old Testament times, it was the foreigners living amongst Israel, it was the widows, and it was the orphans. And in the New Testament times, it was the poor, it was the female, it was those who were outcasts. And in our day and age, especially those of us living in the United States, right now we're seeing that the outcasts, the poor, the marginalized, the ones that we need to listen to are people who are of color, people who have not had a seat at the table and who have not been in positions of power. They are the ones that we need to really listen to. And I think if we sincerely show that we are willing to listen and to empathize and to see what it's like to live life in their shoes, I think that they would be willing to be more ready to listen to us and to hear from us as well. So I just want to challenge us to not have such deep lines drawn in the sand and not to be so staunchly on one side or the other, but that we are really willing to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength by loving our neighbor as ourselves. Just wanted to leave that with us out of Matthew chapter 22 today.